was Halloween night, and I found myself at a college party, Halloween decorations strewn everywhere and a cacophony of laughter and music filling the air. I was a few drinks in when I decided it was a great idea to step out for some fresh air. The night was still young, and I had always loved the chill of the autumn breeze, especially on such a festive night. I noticed the enchanting view of the nearby lake, shimmering under the moonlight. I stumbled down the path leading to the lake, feeling unsteady but exhilarated. The quietness of the water contrasted starkly with the raucous laughter echoing in the distance. I found a bench along the shore, sat back, and let my thoughts wander. Gradually, I succumbed to the calming aura of the lake, losing track of time while staring out into the darkness. After about 30 minutes, though, I sensed an odd presence. Across the lake, a figure stood still on the opposite shore. At first, I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just another partygoer enjoying the scenery, or perhaps someone who had come to watch the eerie beauty of Halloween night. But as I continued to gaze, the figure began to give me an unsettling vibe. To shake off my unease, I pulled out my phone, plugged in my earbuds, and started playing some music. The upbeat tunes drowned out the lingering discomfort, and I managed to forget about the figure for a while. However, nearly 20 minutes later, I glanced up and froze. The person was no longer standing still, and were now halfway across to my side of the lake. My heart began to race. Feeling a chill creeping up my spine, I decided it was time to leave. Gathering my belongings, I took one last look at the figure and noticed they had started walking towards me. Anxiety surged through me, and I quickened my pace along the path, hoping to outdistance them. To my horror, I realized they had also picked up their pace, getting closer with every hurried step I took. I could see the faint light of the street I lived on in the distance, but I instinctively chose to veer into the alley instead of heading straight home. Maybe I could lose them there. My breath quickened as adrenaline coursed through my veins. When I finally reached my front door, I hurriedly shoved my key into the lock, pushed the door open, and bolted inside, slamming it shut behind me. For a moment, I felt safe. I leaned against the door, my heart racing, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. But later that night, I was stirred awake by the blaring sound of a car alarm, and I lay in my bed, hoping my neighbors would eventually get up to check it out. However, after what felt like an eternity, the noise persisted, and I could tell it wasn't stopping. With a sinking feeling, I climbed out of bed and made my way to the window. Peering out, I was struck with terror as I realized the alarm belonged to my car parked right outside. I dashed for my keys, my stomach dropping as I rushed to turn off the relentless alarm. But as I stepped outside, a glint on the ground caught my attention. Shattered glass littered the pavement around my passenger side. Panic surged through me. Who could have done this? I scanned my surroundings, half expecting to see the figure from the lake lurking nearby, but the night was eerily still. My mind raced. Could it have been the person who followed me? There was no way to know for certain. I felt helpless and decided to call the cops, but when they arrived, their response was less than reassuring. They took a report, but their demeanor lacked urgency, and it left me feeling even more vulnerable. In the days that followed, I took precautions. I installed security cameras, one at the front door, one at the back, and one covering the garage. Surrounded by the chilling aftermath of that Halloween night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, nor could I erase the image of the mysterious figure from my mind. It was Halloween night, and my boyfriend Jake and I were excited to enjoy a cozy evening at home. We had stocked up on candy for trick-or-treaters, carved our pumpkins, and even dressed up in our favorite costumes. Everything felt perfect until the sun went down. As night fell, we settled on the couch with a Halloween movie playing in the background. The wind howled outside, creating a spooky atmosphere that made us laugh and cuddle closer. But then, around the time we finished our first bag of popcorn, we heard it. A strange scratching sound coming from the ceiling. "What was that?" Jake asked, glancing up. "I don't know. It's probably just the wind, I replied, trying to sound calm, but I could feel my heart race. I turned up the volume on the TV, hoping it would drown out the noise. But the scratching continued, growing more persistent. It sounded like fingernails dragging against wood. Jake paused the movie and looked at me, his brow furrowed. "We should check it out. It could be a raccoon or something." "Are you sure? What if it's a ghost?" I joked nervously. But the playful banter didn't ease the tightening in my stomach. Despite my fears, Jake got up and headed toward the attic door, which was nestled in the hallway. "Just stay here." He opened the creaky door and climbed up the ladder. I felt a chill run down my spine as I peered up into the darkness. "Hello? Is anyone up there?" Jake called out. For a moment there was silence, and then I thought I heard a faint rustling. My mind raced with thoughts of what could possibly be up there. "Jake, come down," I urged, my voice shaking. "Just a second," he replied, his curiosity getting the better of him. I couldn't help but hold my breath as he disappeared into the attic. A minute passed, then two. I paced back and forth, glancing at the attic door, my pulse pounding in my ears. Suddenly, I heard Jake's voice, but it was laced with confusion and caution. Sarah, you might want to come up here." Reluctantly, I climbed the ladder, my hands sweaty. When I reached the top, I saw him standing by our old boxes, his face pale. "What is it?" I whispered, scanning the dark space. That's not just an old box." I squinted, and as my eyes adjusted, I saw him, a scruffy man huddled in a pile of our old clothes, his eyes wide and frightened. "Who are you?" I gasped, stepping back instinctively. I didn't mean to scare you," the man stammered, his voice shaky. "I've been living up here for a while. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were back." "What do you mean you've been living here?" Jake shouted, anger flaring in his voice. "Get out!" "I had nowhere else to go," the man said, tears brimming in his eyes. "I didn't want to disturb you. I thought if I stayed quiet, you wouldn't notice." I felt a mixture of pity and fear. I didn't want to be rude to someone who might be struggling, but he was in our home without permission. I looked at Jake, who was just as confused as I was. Maybe we should call the police," I suggested hesitantly. The man's face fell. "Please don't do that. I'll leave. I swear. Just give me a second to pack my things." "I don't know if we can trust you," Jake said firmly. "You broke into our home." As we stood there, the tension grew thicker. Finally, Jake pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Hello, we have an intruder in our home," he said, his voice steady but strained. The man's face twisted in anguish as he begged, "I won't hurt you." I felt my heart race as I watched him. He didn't seem threatening, but the fear of the unknown kept me on edge. I tucked myself behind Jake, wanting to feel secure. When the police arrived, we explained everything, and they carefully escorted the man out. I watched him go, feeling a strange sadness mixed with relief. I could see in his eyes that he was desperate, but it didn't change the fact that he had trespassed in our home. It was Halloween night, and everyone was celebrating. I was at a party, laughing and dancing with friends, but I got a little too drunk. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone, so when I got kicked out, I decided to head to a bar nearby. The bar was dimly lit, and people were chatting and having a good time. I was feeling lonely, sitting at the bar, when a guy came over. He seemed cool and friendly, so when he offered to give me a ride home, I agreed. I told him straight up that I wasn't looking for anything else but a ride. He smiled and said, "No problem." When we arrived at my place, he asked if he could come inside. I shook my head and said, "No, that's not part of the deal." Suddenly, his expression changed. He got mad, grabbed my arm, and started to threaten me. My heart raced. I was scared. I tried to hit him, but he hit me back hard. I felt a sharp pain in my nose and realized I was bleeding. I needed to get out of there, so I yanked open the door and stumbled out of the car, but he followed me. He grabbed my hair and told me to go inside. I yelled as loud as I could, "Help! Someone, please!" That made him let go, and he jumped back, cursing under his breath as he got back into his car and drove off. Shaking, I rushed inside and called the cops. I told them everything, my voice trembling. With the help of the bar, they were able to figure out who that guy was. Thank goodness they took me seriously. A few days later, I got a restraining order against him. I also pressed charges. It felt good to take control back. I never thought a fun Halloween night could turn so scary, but I was determined to move on and stay safe.